Are we live now? All right, g'day, obsessors. Sarge is here. And today we're going to be talking to Di Riddell. Di, how are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you
for
having me.
It's good to have you back. I mean, Annette interviewed you last year, which was really cool. So I had a little bit of a look at that. But your story is very, your story is a very sort of painful story that you know, your youth and what you went through when you were younger. And I just wanted to touch a bit more on that. And especially for those people that might not read books as much or whatever, because you've written a few books, but for those that are struggling in a dark spot, like, you know, we have a few options that we can go through, but what you did was you've come out the other side of some pretty bad ordeals in your lifetime, especially younger, like when you were younger in the 60s.
That's right. It was a whole different ball game back in the 60s.
Absolutely. And I've had to go back and do some research on what the government was doing back then with their laws and things like that. So, but firstly, my first question is, describe yourself in 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds?
Yeah.
I'd say that I'm the voice catalyst and game changer for women who've had their voice suppressed.
Right.
So I'm a mature woman, I'm a mother, a grandmother, a partner, a widow, a business owner, a confidence coach, speaker, author. You've done a lot of things in your 73 years. I have.
Di. But let's go straight into it. So you were born in the
1947.
47. So just at the end of World War II.
That's
so
right.
The Australian troops were all coming back, or hadn't been back for too long, or trying to fit into society again when you came along. So tell us a little bit about your parents quickly.
I had a violent alcoholic father.
Yep.
Whether he regretted not going to war or not, I don't know. I never really had a conversation with him.
Yep.
My mother was a very quiet woman who tried to keep the peace.
Yep.
But of course, keeping the peace and trying to work out what they're going to do never works, because an alcoholic changes the goalposts every day.
Yeah.
On Monday night, he might not like potato and peas, but on Tuesday night, he won't like pumpkin and beans.
Yep.
So, you know, you can't second guess. And that they're just simple examples, but it goes through everything through life.
Of course.
So it's all that instability.
So your childhood, we would say, wasn't the best.
No, challenging.
Would have been challenging having an alcoholic father, and that, you know, we look forward into today's society, and that's still happening.
It is.
Okay, especially through COVID, there was a few people that turned to the bottle, so to try and get through that. But and
that's really sad. That's really sad. But
course.
if you're throwing people in there and there's already tension and COVID, you know, with jobs and lack of income, that they all just exacerbate.
Absolutely,
it's already an issue.
100%. So, and then you become a teenager in your 60s, in 1960s, in the 60s, yeah. So life's really different then, but something really bad happened to you in the 60s. What was that? And we call your name was Diana.
Yes.
Yep. So everyone,
and I'd never liked my name Diana, but I didn't actually understand why. But as I moved through life, I realised that all the bad stuff happened to her.
Yes.
And then I switched to Diana and became the woman I became.
Yep.
And then today I'm the compassionate Di.
Yep.
Going back to Diana.
Yep. Let's go back all the way back to the 60s. And Diana, as you were named, what happened?
I was a 15-year-old at a local dance, and a guy that I thought was the bee's knees offered to take me home and give me a night to remember. And in my mind, that was a drive home, a peck on the cheek and look at the stars.
Would you have remembered that? It would have been a nice thing to remember.
It would have been nice, but that's not how it worked. So we left the dance hall, went out and got in his car, and just as he got up the road, I heard a noise, and there were two other fellows in the back who I didn't know, and we didn't go home. So that was a pack rape.
Right. And so where can I ask, where he didn't take you home, they didn't take you home. Where did you go? Did they
they took, I was living in Nambour.
Yep.
It was a little place up near Yandina, Whopper Falls.
Right. So did they just pull a car up somewhere and decide to have their way with you?
In a forestry sort of, there's a park and picnic sort of area.
Yep.
But it wasn't a picnic that night.
No, obviously not. Well, firstly, sorry that's happened, of course, but a long time ago.
It's a long time ago, and I know it's all awful, and I know the treatment from the welfare workers was awful.
Yep.
But by the same token, that's how society was, and we can't put today's values on yesterday's actions.
So did you tell anybody that happened?
No.
Not straight away. So
never. I never told them it was rape.
Right.
Ever.
So so you went home. Did they let you walk home, or like did
they dumped me in the gutter near my home.
Right.
And then a couple of months later, I discovered I was pregnant, and I wouldn't say who the father was. Well, I couldn't say who the father was because
you didn't actually know.
I didn't actually know.
Yep.
So I had quite a hard time with that, and I wasn't going to tell my parents. But my eldest brother, who was like the rock of the family, I went to see him and told him.
Right.
So he took me.
Hayley wants to say something.
Yeah, I do. I want to know. Thank you, first of all. Thank you for sharing your story, because it's. I know how hard and very difficult it not only would have been for you back then, but also to be on a podcast show and bearing your soul. So thank you very much. Did you ever see the guys subsequent? Have you never seen them again?
No.
Would you know who they are?
Well, the one that I knew, yes.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't know him now because he was about 5 years older than me.
Yeah.
The other two guys, and it was dark anyway. But no, I didn't know who they were.
Yep. All right. So I've left you in the gutter. You've gone home. I'm assuming that's not something that you can just wake up the next day and just go, well, that was a bad dream, and move on. So this is going to be weighing in on you for the next couple of months until you actually found out you're pregnant. What was that period of time like for you?
Absolutely frightening, because I had no one to turn to. I had nobody to talk to. I couldn't tell anybody.
Yep.
And it was just fear, total, absolute, overwhelming fear.
If we look back now, and hindsight is, we know what hindsight is. It's we should have done this or should have done that. But when you do look back, do you still agree that there was nobody that you could turn to at that point in time because of the way society was?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So even right now today, you'd look back and go, there was nobody that I could go to. There was no women's shelter.
Anyone.
There was no.
Oh, they didn't have women's shelters in those days.
Of course.
No.
Okay. So then how did you find out you were pregnant? I'm assuming you were having morning sickness or something.
And no periods.
Yeah.
So
and then
after a couple of months, I thought that's it. So I went to the doctor. And
now, did you talk to your mum or something? Like so you took yourself to the doctor, right? Because you're still a schoolgirl.
Yeah, I had just finished school.
Right.
So I was just going into the beginning of the following year. So I had left school and I was working as a assistant nurse, they call them in those days, at the hospital, because I wasn't old enough to start training.
Yep.
But
so you had easy access to a doctor.
I had easy access to a doctor.
All right.
And it wasn't easy once I found out the news. And then, of course, Mum just burst into tears, and Dad absolutely exploded and just wanted me gone. He didn't care what happened as long as I wasn't there. And I know now it was my brother, but actually I didn't know who it was for quite some time.
Yep.
I was sent away as a housemaid to a doctor in Brisbane.
Yep.
It was somewhere in the Kenmore area.
Mm-hmm.
And I was meant to be like light duties and babysitter for their 2 preschool children.
Yep.
But I was actually the household help.
Okay.
The cook, the washer,
but they would have
after the children.
But was that so bad? Like that little, was that actually a good thing to have that, or was it not? I mean, your parents have not taken you in, so that's sad.
Well, Mum would have.
But your dad wouldn't.
Dad wouldn't.
Right. So at least
Mum didn't drive in those days, so she couldn't come down and see me. So that made it difficult.
From Nambour.
But the horrifying thing was that doctor was my attending doctor.
That would be called a conflict of interest these days, wouldn't it?
It would.
Yep.
And it was one of those L-shaped sort of houses. So the kitchen and living area was downstairs. Their bedrooms were upstairs, and then there was a wing at the back, the laundry, and then a room behind that, and that was my room.
Yep.
And he used to try and get into my room.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not.
So you're pregnant, and he knows this, and this is why you're living there, and this is why you're not with your family.
Yes.
And he's still trying to.
Yes, he thought he'd take advantage.
Did he?
No, because I locked it.
Good.
I locked the windows. It was summertime, but I locked the windows and locked the doors. I just lived in fear.
Exactly. So you've gone from living in fear at your own house. Now you can't live there. Living in fear at these people that have taken.
And I couldn't leave because I didn't have anywhere to go. And when I went for my antenatal visit, I was taken into the back of the surgery because it was too shameful and disgusting for me to walk in the front door. And when I was in his office, I tried to ask some questions about what to expect, and he said, "You'll find out when you get there." That was my antenatal care.
So then you have your baby.
Then I had the baby.
And
It
he's...
was a 36-hour labour.
Oh,
They refused me pain relief.
Yep.
Because that was my punishment for my behaviour. And
so there's a lot of this is based on...
awful. And it was a private nursing home. I've actually tried to source it, but it's not there anymore. It's Corinda Nursing Home, but it's not there anymore.
Okay. A lot of this is based on religious beliefs, isn't it, too? Like you sinned.
Yes.
There was sex before marriage, all this was not that it was your fault, but
they didn't listen to that though. And police didn't look kindly of, you wouldn't have reported to the police anyway because it was always the girl's fault. She asked for it. She did something.
What can I ask what you told your parents? What did you tell them? Nothing. That you were just...
Absolutely nothing.
So they don't know who this man, not that there was just one.
They
never knew that's what happened.
So my elder brother did all the talking and then he arranged for me to go elsewhere. Mum tried to talk to me. Dad just screamed. Mum tried to talk to me, but I wouldn't tell her. I just clammed up.
Yep.
I didn't think it was safe to tell anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do, so I shut up. I just withdrew into myself.
Yep. And there was not a lot
as a scared, coming up to 16, I was just petrified.
There's no Dr. Google, there's no online, there's no internet, there's
nothing.
No mobile phones, there's nothing back then. So a lot of young people right now, which it's easy to say that we didn't have any of this technology, but technology is communication, and you didn't have anyone that you could communicate. You can't just look up pick up a book and just read of somebody else's experience similar to yours and read what they had done.
I didn't have access to books anyway. I didn't have access to anything because I was at the house. I didn't go anywhere.
Did you see? So your firstborn was a boy?
A boy.
So did you even see your son when he was born? Because I heard, I've done some reading this morning about what the adoption laws and forced adoption was in Australia between 1940 and 1975. And yeah, basically I've read a lot of sheets were put up. You couldn't even see your own.
No, that's right.
Yeah. And then they're taken away and you never saw your son at all.
See, hear, touch or name.
Yep. And what doctors and social workers and everything back then thought that if it was a clean break, then when that baby is adopted to a new adopted family, that they will not have the stigma of that. They wouldn't be feeling like they're missing their actual real mum because they would thought their adopted parents were their real parents.
But there was no thought given to the mother.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I read a lot.
You were just the disgusting piece of rubbish, I guess, that, how dare you blemish the earth with your presence.
So what happened after that? So your baby's taken away from you. Do you just go back into society and as if it never happened, or what happens? You're a 16-year-old now?
Yes, I came out, and the welfare workers, when they were just screaming at me, they just stood over me. Mm-hmm. I was lying on the bed, and they just screamed at me until I signed the papers. Yep. And I can't quite remember what happened after that, but anyway, I went off nursing.
Yep.
And,
of course.
And I was still in Brisbane, and because of my low self-worth,
yep,
I allowed people to use and abuse me, and I had an abusive boyfriend, and 4 or 5 years later I fell pregnant a second time.
So was it pretty much, did you just have that one boyfriend after your first?
Oh no, there were a couple, but right. I really did attract the abusive type.
Of course.
But I didn't understand that. But then I thought that's what I was worth. I didn't think I was worth
Well, you had people yelling at you. You had people that you would be looking up to, your parents and doctors, all like professional people in society telling you were worthless. So what else were you supposed to think?
And I'd had it from Dad prior to that.
Of course.
So, it was just a continuing story.
Yep.
That I thought, well, this must be it. This must be what's going to happen.
So then you've found an abusive boyfriend and you fall pregnant to him. How old were you then? 20. So, that's not, if you had fallen in love with a gorgeous man and decided that you wanted to get married and have babies,
that would have been a different story.
20 is not a bad age. That's okay. But that's not what happened.
That's not what happened.
So again, you're not married?
I'm not married.
And
the,
you
the
fall
catalyst,
pregnant?
the catalyst for my walking away from him, I
Yep.
was nursing. By then, I was nursing in Maryborough.
Yep.
And I was in Brisbane one weekend at his parents'. He was still living at home, at his parents' home, and his father came home drunk and didn't like what was on the table for dinner, and hit his mother and knocked her across the room. And she got up and she looked at me and she said, "I suppose I deserve that." And it was just like the flashlights just went off in my head, and I thought, that's going to be you. Get out of here.
Yep.
So I walked away. I didn't know I was pregnant at that
Oh, wow. Right.
I walked away.
Yep.
And then found I was pregnant. But I wouldn't have gone back anyway.
Of course.
It was over.
Because not only would you have been in that situation, but you would have been trying to bring a baby up in that situation too. So
society was not conducive to that. I mean, there were a lot of young girls who got pregnant and families adopted them. Families took them on and that child thought that the mother was the sister and the grandmother was their mother.
Mother, right.
And a lot of families did that.
Yep.
The ones that were more conducive.
And this is the end of the 60s, heading into the 70s,
in the 60s.
Yep. And so did you and your second baby, so what happened then? Like you're pregnant, you get like, did you have, was it the same? Was it similar? Like you were unmarried?
It wasn't anywhere near as bad.
Yep.
From the lead up, I was, and I don't remember how it was arranged, but anyway, I worked as a live-in maid, I suppose, to a couple. He was in the army. They had 3 children.
Yep.
And he was away a lot of the time, which was good. But when he was home, he was abusive to his wife. And their littlest was about 2 or 3, and she worked in the evenings. And if he cried, I used to put his mother's dressing gown on, and we both had long hair. And then he thought it was his mother, and he'd go back to sleep.
Right.
Until one night when the husband thought that I was fair game. But I got away from him and locked my door, and nothing else happened with that.
Society,
but it was still pretty grim. But when I had the second child, the treatment at the Royal Women was a little better.
Yep.
I was at least given pain relief. But the welfare workers had not changed one iota. They just screamed even louder at me because I was a disgrace to myself, the human race, and everything in between.
Of course.
Go nursing and get out of society's way, because no decent man will ever want you.
Did they know that was your second child?
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. Did you meet your daughter? Did you get to hold her before they took her away?
No. Oh, no, that hadn't changed. No.
So they
Still
literally
couldn't
sheet
see,
up.
hear,
You can't
touch.
see.
Yep.
Gone.
Or name. Gone.
Right.
So I went off nursing and I buried that.
Yep.
I buried all that stuff very deep, and I thought, well, nursing is going to be my life. So off I went, and I became officious and efficient. I was very good at it.
So that's pretty much the worst of the physical parts of your growing up, of your youth, through your teenage years and then into your early 20s. I mean, it wouldn't have been a day go past that you wouldn't have thought that you've got 2 children out there that you've never met, never seen, never heard of, but they're out there somewhere.
Yeah.
But you buried it.
Buried it.
When did Diana turn into Diane? Was that?
That was after I married. And then I met my husband.
Right.
And he had 4 children aged 10 to 16, and I was 24.
Mm-hmm.
My mother nearly had a fit, saying, what?
So
what
you were back
you
in
doing?
contact with your mum, like you?
I'd been in contact with mum all the time.
That's
it's
okay,
just that she couldn't openly support me because of Dad.
Course. Yep. And what about your father? They were still together?
They were still together.
So
he was abusive, but she couldn't. Well, she didn't have anywhere else to go.
But she would at least be contacting you. She'd be.
Yeah, I was in contact with mum.
Yep, that's cool.
Yeah, I didn't have any trouble with mum.
Yep.
But I just never told her about the rape.
Okay. And then, so the worst has happened. You've buried it, and you meet a guy.
Yeah.
And you end up marrying.
We got married.
And he had 4 kids.
He had 4 kids.
That you were not that much older than yourself. And hey, look, that happens these days.
It does.
There's a lot of
blended families were not socially acceptable then. And we lived in a little parochial town, North Eaton, which is just outside of Mackay.
Yep.
So I was very much the object of discussion because I was 16 years younger than Les.
Yes.
I was tall and slim, long skinny legs, long hair, halfway down to my bum.
Yep.
It didn't really fit the persona of senior staff.
Of course. What did he do? What was his?
He was a chief chemist in a sugar mill, technologist.
Got you. I don't like those people. Those people have. Yes, I got a problem with CSR and.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
No, he wasn't working for CSR.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
There is a CSR mill in Mackay, but not the one that Les worked at.
There's an old dilapidated building up there with the Sugar Institute
it
or
used
something.
to be the Sugar Research.
Yeah, I've driven past that a few times in the last couple of years, and I just think these are the people that made us think that fat made us fat and sugar was awesome and got us addicted to sugar, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, but again, that was society, and that's how society. It was. We can't put today's values on yesterday's actions.
Of course. So now looking back at Les, your marriage to Les, and was that love? Was that you?
Yes, it was love. Yeah, we had a wonderful 31-year relationship.
That's awesome. Despite
until he went to heaven.
Yeah, of course. But despite what society was looking at you, and it would have got better for you as you.
Oh yeah, no, I got stronger. I took it all very personally at first.
Yep.
But then I got stronger, and I started to move into the community, and I joined Toastmasters.
Yeah, you did.
That was an absolute turning point, and that's been a saviour. The friendships that I've developed over these 43 years that I've been in the organisation have been amazing. Yep.
So when you say Toastmasters, for anyone who's out there listening, we're not saying that everyone has to go and join Toastmasters, are we? Toastmasters, I want to go and do some public speaking for sure and get better at doing this, but any sort of club or any sort of group activity with other people that are like-minded, you would say that is what you needed, and that's what you found with Toastmasters.
I didn't go because I wanted to be a public speaker. I went to increase my confidence.
There you go.
And because I was so much younger than Les.
Yep.
All of his associates were more his age bracket, and so were the wives.
Yes.
So I needed a bit of confidence to be able to mix with them and feel A-okay.
Right. So we're talking about this transition, not that you actually changed your name, but you stopped being called Diana, and you were asking, like, you were introducing yourself as Diane. And
I was Diane to Les.
Yep. And so that woman Diana, that former Diana part of your life, you just put it away, tried not to think about it, because you've got this new life now with your new husband. You're acting as a mother to these 4 children, which aren't your children, but it's kind of like, well, I had to give my first 2 children away. So this works for me right now. That worked for you.
And then we had a son a year later.
So you guys had a kid together too.
We had a child together.
Oh. How was that, having a child that wasn't taken off you as soon as you gave birth?
It was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Where was that? Where were you then?
In Mackay.
In Mackay?
In Mackay.
And when was that? Was that 80s? In the 80s yet?
No, Pete was born in 72.
Okay. Well, okay. That's still just before me. So I can't imagine what it would have been like to have your first 2 children removed in those 2 circumstances, but then now to have, and you'd been a mother to Les's kids for this time. It's not like now you didn't know what you were doing.
They weren't babies.
Oh, they weren't babies. So, but this is your opportunity to change nappies and, do the bottle and do all that things, stuff. Right? Amazing. Look at the smile on your face.
It really was. It was an absolutely magical time.
Yep.
And Les knew what it meant to me.
Awesome. And you were able to raise that child with the others, and they were probably starting to leave home.
Yeah, they were.
But
the eldest 2 left home fairly quickly.
Yeah, of course. Well, then Les died.
Yep, he passed away in 2002.
Right. So you had a really good 30-odd years of marriage with him. Everything else in the past sort of was just gone. And then you had this happen to you. And that's hard.
That was absolutely devastating, because he was my rock.
He was
my absolute rock.
Did you tell him much about what happened in the past?
I told him before we got married. He was the only person I told.
That's very respectable.
I wouldn't have married someone without. Well, you can't do that if you haven't got honesty and trust to start with. And
I totally agree, but not everybody gets married.
It comes back to the trust thing, from how my trust had been destroyed. I trusted the guy to take me home from the dance. Mm-hmm. And then I trusted the other guy who was abusing me, and my trust was abused.
The doctor you live with too?
The doctor Yeah, he too was abusing my trust.
You must have had very little trust in anyone, and then Les
My
comes
trust
along.
factor was extra low.
Les comes along and he helps rebuild trust with you in people, because not everyone's bad, are they?
No, they're not. No, absolutely not.
And just because people and other people would have known what was going on, but just they don't want to get involved. Doesn't make them a bad person, but they don't want to get involved because society and life back then was, well, if you tried to make a difference, if you tried to protest something, if you tried to, I mean, you can protest Vietnam War and you can protest, burning your bras and stuff like that. But when it's something that close to home, like being raped and
whole different ball
isn't
game.
it? So
dealing with my grief after Les passed away,
yes,
all this past stuff bubbled up.
So everything's come back up.
It all came up.
Because now you weren't alone, but you were lonely. Like how were you feeling after he passed away? He's
lonely, although I had a lot of friends and really supportive.
Because you were in Toastmasters then.
I was in Toastmasters then.
So you had a lot of support
really
from
close
those
friends.
people. Yeah.
But it's not the same. You still go home to the house on your own. No matter how much love and support you get from your friends, you still go home to an empty house at 9 time. You're still facing yourself when you go inside and shut the door.
How old was your youngest then? Born in 72.
72 to 2002, 30.
Was that a son or a daughter? I didn't.
Son.
Okay, so that's your youngest son. So he was there for you? Like he's.
Oh yes, yeah. Yep. But he didn't live close by.
Yeah, but he's still there. He's still your son. He still means a lot to you. Now you're starting to think about what's happened back in the 60s through the 70s. At least you can think about your son. You can think about.
Kids didn't know about that.
Right.
Until I wrote the book.
Wow.
In 2006, I wrote my story. And then when it was about to be published, I thought I have to tell
you do
the kids.
I think so.
And that would be one of the hardest things I ever did. But they were all very supportive, very surprised. And I didn't have any issues with them at all. None at all. So that was amazing.
But this is the 2000s now when this happened.
Yeah, that's true.
And a lot has changed in the world.
Yeah.
We've, feminism has really helped women be on equal ground with men. Still not quite there.
Yeah.
It's also shown that there's parts of men that aren't up there with women. Women have really come through and dominated some really key aspects of life.
Yeah, they have. They really have, yeah.
And this is on the back of a lot of, you're not the only person who have gone through this sort of stuff. I mean, you wouldn't have known because like yourself, other women wouldn't have been talking about it.
It wasn't until I started to go out speaking and sharing my story that mature women were coming up to me and saying my sister, my friend went through similar. And obviously going nursing and get out of society's way was the catch cry for the welfare agencies because they all told me exactly the same thing.
Yep. And so then you've wrote your book, your first book.
So that was 2006.
Sorry, I've just had a question.
Yeah.
Good.
Bethany has asked, how did you dig up and process all of that buried trauma without becoming totally overwhelmed?
What a good question. About 12 months after Les passed away, I had lost a lot of weight.
Yep.
And I just drove myself into the ground. So I was diagnosed with clinical depression and that started my climb back out to move forward. And a friend of mine gave me an Al-Anon book. So for anyone who doesn't know what Al-Anon is, it's for the family and friends of alcoholics, whereas AA is the alcoholic themselves.
For that person, yep.
And Al-Anon use the 12-step program, but they take out the alcohol and put you in it. So it's one of the best self-development tools around. So I followed that religiously. So
there's the book for alcoholics themselves.
Yep.
And then to help all of those people around that particular alcoholic, there's a book to help those people help the alcoholic. So that's amazing to think that that's sort of thing's been going around for a while.
Oh, it's been around for years, but I didn't know about it.
Sure. But I guess straight away I'll put that into perspective and think about all of these. Okay, we've got a special course for men that are perpetrators of domestic violence, but then not so much those that are around that man. Nobody around that man knows how to deal with him, and there's no book on that, is there?
No.
You see what I'm saying? Like, it sounds like AA had that pretty going on really good. Yes. So, yeah, okay. So good question, Bethany. So you started to process.
Oh, so that's right.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
forgot the question.
No, the question was how did you come out of depression?
That's why I came out of the, I went off to a psychologist.
Yep.
And I was on antidepressants for a short time, but I didn't want to be on them. So I ensured that I got off them. But the psychologist I went to was amazing because she gave me strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And she worked with me. I don't know, I had about 3 months treatment with her. And that was enough to get me going.
So you definitely really recommend seeing a professional, a psychologist, for instance? Yep.
Yeah, I do. And I think there's a place for everything if you get the right person. I went off and saw the first psychologist.
Yep.
And I didn't click with her. And she spent most of the session telling me about her computer problems.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to walk out the door, she said, "See you next week." And I said, "No, you won't." And then I stepped back and I didn't want to go to another one.
Yep.
And about 6 months later, my doc said, "I really think you should go, Di. And this lady that I'm sending you to now, she's really good."
Yep.
And I said, "Okay." And he wanted to give me one of those subsidised, 10 visit thingies.
Yeah, Medicare
And I
thing.
said, I'll do a deal with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go the first time and pay. And if I think she can help me, I'll come back and do it.
Yep.
And that happened. I paid for the first visit.
Yep.
And I thought, she spent. But when I left there, I had a plan,
mm-hmm.
and one thing built on another. So that helped me. And then going through the 12 steps, because you go through the 12 steps, just taking alcohol out and putting yourself in.
Yep.
And one of the steps covers writing your story in 3 segments. And that was when I first really looked at it and tried to make sense of it. Well, I couldn't remember. I had a lot of trouble remembering.
Yep.
So I'd write snippets down and I'd leave it there and I'd walk past it and I'd come back and pick it up. So I had written that really nasty bit prior to actually getting, because I had no intentions of writing a book then. And then the book evolved.
But the first part was just writing those memories down so you can process that, so you can get closure. You'd be looking for closure with that part of your life. I was looking for closure, yes. Because you hadn't really dealt with it. You'd only just suppressed it. I didn't have the tool. I suppressed it because I didn't have the tools to deal with it. Have I answered the question? What was the question? Well, by pretty much the short answer was by writing it down.
Okay.
But the long answer was the long answer was you had help in finding out that that's what you needed to do. One psychologist didn't help you, the next one did. It took a little while, but writing it down, and then from writing down those things that happened, you could then find closure from it. But then you got carried away with writing stuff down, and you ended up writing a few books.
I'm so sorry, guys. We are going to have to wrap up. We definitely want to have a part 2 because I just want to hear the rest of your story anyway.
Okay.
But I do have a quick question. Have you met the children that were adopted out?
Yes, that comes out in the second book. So Beyond Abuse was the original. That was 2006. And then in 2018, I republished. And I talked about things that had happened in the intervening. About things that had happened in the intervening years, and I included some men's stories and some other women's stories. Now, the day that link went live, again, this explosion happened in my head, and I thought, I'm ready to search. In 2 short months, I had found, met, and hugged my daughter.
Can we leave it there?
And she lives in Toowong.
No, we're going to come back to that, Di. Part 2, another time.
Definitely.
All right. Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.